Happy first day of spring.
Happy first day of spring.
Today is what, March
19th?
Yes, March 19th.
Yep.
Yep.
Beautiful days the last
Absolutely
few
beautiful
weeks.
days.
It's
Yes.
been so good for the soul.
Yeah.
Good transition into our wine. It's
Yes.
been rosé time.
It's rosé time.
Rosé time.
Yeah.
So, adulting from Alexandria Nicole Cellars.
Oh, it's from Alexandria Nicole.
Yes. So
okay, that's why I
I'm not
like
a
it.
huge bubbles.
Yeah.
I actually like a decent amount of orange juice in my mimosas because I
Sure.
like to tame the bubbles.
Okay.
This is a slightly bubbly rosé.
Oh.
They also have a white.
Okay.
It's just like a nice,
just like a little effervescence.
Yes.
Right? Okay. The bottle is so pretty.
It's called Adulting.
It's a little sassy.
And there's a bunch of sayings in there. Like, in my defense, I was left unsupervised. Dear autocorrect, it was never duck. And so on.
That's funny.
So,
oh, yeah. A little bit of effervescence in there.
A little bit of bubbles.
Pretty.
Big fan. This is my
cool.
They also have a white as well, which is really good.
Like with a little bit of sparkle to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a pretty peachy color. I like
Cheers.
it. Cheers.
We haven't had wine on these for a while.
I know. It's been a while. Oh, that's really good.
Mm-hmm. Just light summer.
Yeah, and it's not in your face bubbly. Mm-hmm. It's nicely sweet. It's not overpowering. It smells floral. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
Big
what a
fan
win.
of it. Big fan of it.
What a win.
Yeah. And I think it's 17 to 20 maybe.
That's a great value.
Yeah.
Yeah. Delicious.
My best friend's a member there, so I always get a good price on it.
Nice. But there you go.
Get the members discount.
Yeah, that's a win. I rate that that's a good. I'm not a big rosé fan. That's a solid 8 or 9 out of 10 for me.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I love this one.
Happy birthday to your daughter.
I know, she's turned 2. I have
Yay.
a 2-year-old. I don't know where the time went.
I don't know where the time went either, because I remember when you had just popped her out.
We had met right when I came back, back to work. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The girl thrived on her birthday.
Yep.
Just
all about the gifts.
All about the gifts. She got some dress up stuff.
Love
and
it.
the earrings and the necklaces and the shoes, and just
love it.
We had a bunch of Amazon deliveries, of course. And every time they came there, she was like, present. And we're like, not for you. These are not for you.
Cute.
But
love
yeah,
it.
so she's thriving.
Love it.
So excited for the summer and just the sun to come out.
Yeah, the sun has been nice. It's been a little much for me.
Yeah, well, you've been recovering from
asthma like crazy.
I mean, you've been sick since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, it's been 5 weeks. I'm at 90% now.
Okay.
I'll take it.
Take it.
Probably started as RSV is what my doctor thinks.
Okay.
And then I just was not on a controller asthma medication, which was my own fault. And plus my insurance wouldn't cover the inhaler that works for me.
Okay.
So that's been really fun to fight back.
You made it. You've been busy, though. We've been busy.
Yeah, been busy. My insurance finally approved the inhaler yesterday.
Oh, good.
So, hallelujah. So I'm feeling much, much, much better. But yeah, it's been a whole journey with my health lately.
Yeah.
So
glad to see.
I'm glad to be in person and going out in the world lately.
Yeah, exactly.
But I've also been slamming busy the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, I mean,
which I'm grateful for, but it's also been a little bit much for me. So I'm grateful. I'm going to take a little break in a couple weeks.
I'm so excited for you for that trip.
Yeah. I'm going to take a few days to myself and just relax and recharge before craziness happens in April and May.
Full spring market. I mean, I feel like spring market's already hitting.
Oh, yeah.
Big time. That's kind of the topic that we're going to be talking about today is market update, and then this NAR, National Association of Realtors settlement. That's all over the news.
Whole situation.
Which one do we want to start with?
Let's go market update.
Cool.
I talked to one of my past clients, probably upcoming seller, yesterday. We talked a little bit about the NAR, and we're just gonna say NAR from now on. National Association of Realtors. It's a mouthful, so NAR. Maybe let's define what NAR is. It's National Association of Realtors. Basically, your brokerage can elect to join as a whole the National Association of Realtors, and then you're typically a part of like a local chapter. So for this area, when I was a part of them, I was also a part of Washington King County Realtors as well. So your whole brokerage has to decide to join. It's not like obligatory that you have to be one. You're already licensed local, or with your state or whatever. National Association of Realtors.
And just to be clear,
yes,
not when people hear realtor, not every single real estate agent is a realtor.
Correct.
In order to be considered a realtor,
you have to be part of the National Association of Realtors.
So it's like a square and a rectangle.
Yes, correct.
A square is a rectangle. Yes. All realtors are real estate agents, but not all real estate agents are realtors. And I'll speak to this just because I think it sounds better coming from me than you being a real estate agent. Like, it doesn't freaking matter.
No, I think that you need to figure out if your broker is competent and if they have a good moral compass, if they're abiding by the rules, if they're
actually have your best interest in mind.
Correct.
Yeah.
I don't believe that you need to be a realtor in order to be a great broker.
Yeah.
At all.
And we were talking to your designated broker, and we, just having the conversation. And I asked, like, what's the advantage of being a part of that? And the one thing that they do is do lobbying for the general, but that's not for the general real estate industry.
Correct.
But for a single agent, that's not going to impact their interactions with their clients.
Not necessarily. There definitely are perks, like as in they offer discounted continuing education classes, like that sort of thing. You have to abide by the NAR code of ethics. But, my designated broker, he was like, we already have a code of ethics when it comes to being a licensed broker in the state of Washington. So just having this extra designation and having to pay extra money to be part of this association, each brokerage can decide if they want to be a part of that. Yep. So where was I going with that?
Well, we were going down a market update, but then we switched to just NAR explanation and all of that.
Yeah. So I'll kind of go, why don't I do this? Why don't I talk about my listings and my buyer scenarios the last few months? Because we're almost going into quarter 2 of this year. So I have closed 3 buyers.
Okay.
Only one of them was competitive, 9 offers. I have closed 1 listing that was competitive, closed last week, 3 offers. I have 2 listings on the market right now that are just kind of, they're getting showings, but nothing is going crazy right now.
How long have those been on the market?
One has been on for almost 5 weeks.
Okay.
The other has been on a week. We actually just got a bunch of, I shouldn't say a bunch. We got 3 showings scheduled in the next 1 to 2 days.
Okay.
So activity, and I think it also depends on what type of listing you are. Are you a single family home, or are you a condo, or are you a townhouse? Those different markets behave differently. And so what I'm experiencing, and I have several upcoming listings, I'm very seller heavy right now, which has been actually really great for my health issues, honestly.
Yes. It's also great for the market.
It's also fantastic for the market, more inventory for buyers to choose from. But what I'm basically seeing is that if it's an entry point single family home, those are just flying off the shelves, multiple offers, going crazy. I mean, I live in Linwood, and I am, I need to be careful. I don't want to get in trouble for pre-marketing. Let's just say I have some business in the area coming up, and the comps are just going out of control. Where I thought I might price or value a home in my area has now changed by $150,000 to $200,000
in a matter of
2 months.
That's crazy.
It's been absolutely wild.
I mean, I'm hearing either from clients or other real estate agents, just to add another perspective, is there's 30 offers on homes.
There can be
on, and that's kind of where you're saying those
I think it's those entry level or like
family.
you're wanting to upgrade into like your next. So let's say you were in a condo or a really small home, and now you're wanting to get into that next entry level price point. Depending on your neighborhood, depending on that market, man, it's getting wild again.
Yep.
But on the flip side, I think the condo and townhouse market is really just drastically different. Now, I think there's multiple offers, and I have seen multiple offers with comps for my listings right now that are certainly going crazy. But for the most part, it's pretty tame in those particular markets, the condos and the townhouses. And kind of circling back, I was talking with like a past client and probably upcoming seller in the next couple months, that she was asking, what's the market doing? Like, is this a good time to sell? Should we wait another year? Just because they're saying that the rates are going to come down. And I said, I don't have a crystal ball. I really don't. And if anything, the last 2 years has just taught us that like,
we have no
expect the unexpected, because it's been a wild ride. It is like full on country out there right now. And every day changes.
Yes.
And so just side note, this is why it's so important to hire a full-time broker that is in this day in and day out. Don't go part-time, like really vet your person, because there's so many changes happening. You need someone that you can count on that has got a good pulse on things. So
because it changes quickly.
It changes so quickly. And if you're not able to adapt and pivot and not foresee those changes, but be ahead of maybe the changes that are being predicted, that's going to mean you're going to win as a client, as either a buyer or seller. So what I told her, I said, you need to sell when it's the right time to sell for you. This is not my decision. This is your decision. And if it makes sense for you to liquidate this place now, I'm here to support you. Now, here's what the comps are showing. What do you think this would sell for?
Is she buying?
She's selling.
Is she selling and then buying, or just selling?
Nope, already bought.
Okay.
Yep. So
that puts her in a great position.
Yep. Yeah. So they've been renting it, Airbnb-ing it, and doing well. But I think it's just time to like liquidate and move on. So, so I told her, I said, this is an election year. We've got the fall situation coming upon us. And I have now going into this next election, this will be the third election cycle that I've been a part of. Every single time that I've experienced, buyers pull back because they're really uncertain about how whoever the new president is going to affect the economy, the market, rates, all of that. And so I do think we will probably see some pullback with buyers in the fall. But if rates go down, loan apps are going to go up. Buyers going to enter the market. Are we going to have this inventory that's going to support all this buyer demand? Probably not. We don't have enough houses for the amount of people moving to this area. So, ultimately, they're thinking about it getting back to me. But that was something that I told them. I said, you need to buy when it's right for you. You need to sell when it's right for you. And here are the facts about what's going on right now. Here's what I can tell you about today. I can't tell you about tomorrow because it's not here yet. So,
and so much can change.
And then pivoting in that same conversation is very interesting. This is actually the second time this has popped up in a conversation with sellers. But both sellers were like, Marisa, I heard via the news, the headlines, that I don't have to pay a buyer broker anymore. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. And essentially these headlines, and I'm sure buyers are experiencing, this news cycle right now, saying these journalists are saying that housing is going to get more affordable because the sellers are not going to have to pay a buyer broker. And that just could not be farther from the truth.
I think before you dive fully into that definitely leads into the whole NAR situation, trying to stay focused on general market update and kind of, the going off of that, the affordability of homes, like reverting back to what you had said even earlier, is like, as rates drop, as they're quote supposed to, which I'll get into that in a second, demand's going to go up,
right?
And there's still not going to be enough inventory.
It's economics 101.
There's
supply and demand.
And so we're gonna get into this this bidding wars
Right.
and multiple offers and all that type of stuff. From my perspective with rates and everything, there were the consumer price index, CPI, and producer price index, PPI, inflation reports that came out last week. They were higher than expected.
Sure. And so it's March 19th.
Yep.
We're going to release this March 21st.
Yep. And the Feds are meeting today and tomorrow for their monthly meeting. Going into this year, people were kind of targeting March as their first rate cut. I doubt that's going to happen.
Okay.
Inflation number in the last meeting they did, Powell was really grilled on like, well, what do you want to see? What do you want to see in order to cut rates? And the reporters were grilling him, but I also got his standpoint. He's like, we just need to see that inflation is going down and continuing to go down. Like, it's not that we're trying to reach a specific number. I mean, they want to get that 2% inflation number, but like, there's not like, we need to see it go down by X amount. Like, they just want to see it continuing to progress and all of that type of stuff. Well, with these hotter inflation numbers, not the case. So the likelihood that they cut rates tomorrow, very unlikely. And in fact, we're all kind of, June was kind of what we're thinking, and then now, we're even like, oh, maybe July. But it really all depends on what these inflation reports come out as. So when those inflation reports came out, we saw rates come up, and we're seeing a very range-bound volatility. Like, we're not seeing way up and way down, but we're seeing this like
pretty tight,
but kind of like within a 0.5%.
Right.
So a decent amount, but nothing like, you're not seeing a full point, but this like up a 0.5 point, down a 0.5 point, like this very volatile range bound.
It's staying pretty tight the last few months, which has been nice, which I think that has been encouraging buyers to re-enter the market.
Yes.
Because it's not like, oh, we're in the 8s now. Like
I think people are just used to it now.
Right.
It's
been 2 years.
It's been 2 years, and
now things are stable-ish.
Exactly. So I think that's why we're seeing the increase. And every time we see rates drop, we see mortgage applications increase significantly.
I remember, this was a little over a year ago. We saw a big rate drop, and I remember that week mortgage applications jumped up 28%.
Yeah.
So I mean, we don't know when that's going to happen this year.
Yeah.
But that's a big freaking
jump.
It's
a big number.
Yeah.
It's a big number. So we're, and I'm seeing it with just conversations I'm having that more and more, whether it's new applications or pre-approvals that have been sitting there for a year and they're just waiting, they're starting to do that.
Sure.
And, obviously you have to be ready your time.
Oh, yeah.
Your time. If you are thinking that you're ready, getting in before rates go down is going to be a huge benefit.
Absolutely.
I heard someone say, and it's, people are always so focused on what's my rate? What's my rate? What's my rate? Because yes, that does have a huge impact.
Yep.
But the one thing that you can't go back and change is your purchase price.
Right.
Is your negotiation.
You can't change your house that you offered on either.
You can't. Yeah. I mean, you can sell, but you cannot change your purchase price. You cannot change the any credit that you negotiate, anything like that. So even more reason to make sure you have that strong real estate agent on your side.
Right.
But your interest rate, you're going to change it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I refinanced twice I had 3 loans in the first 3 years of owning my home.
Yeah. I think I've had 5 loans in my almost 10 years.
Yeah. So the likelihood that someone actually stays in their loan for the life of the loan is probably next to nothing.
Yeah. And then the thing too, like life situations change. So like for us, like I had some student loan debt that I needed to get rid of because the payments were just killing me. The rates were climbing. So we did a cash out refi to pay off my student loans and get a stable payment.
Yep.
Then, maybe in real estate, it's, it's feast and famine. So 1 year I might be making a great amount of money. The next year it's not as great. And it's like, oh, things are getting tight. Credit card bills are going up. Like we need to refi, like get rid of some of this debt. And like life changes. And so you're not locking into that rate.
Yeah.
Which is great.
And on the like debt consolidation, like we've touched on this before, but credit card interest rates are so astronomically high. If you have a large amount of credit card debt, look at what the numbers would look like. Like it's people will save $500,000 a month of total monthly cash flow.
Right. Yeah. So definitely something to look into. So
So I guess overall, like we feel the spring market heating up.
Oh yeah.
In between buyer and seller activity, we're seeing stable rates and still anticipating some sort of rate decrease this year, both from the feds as well as that will correlate to mortgage rates, or in theory it should. And, you know, I think from my perspective, the amount of decrease is going to be lower than what we thought it would be going into this year. But I still think we'll see a decrease.
Yeah, I wish we had a crystal ball. We just don't. We have all these reports that we go off of, and you know these experts that you know they're doing their best that they can to predict things. But so I guess maybe tying back into that conversation with the sellers and kind of pivoting a little bit. So, I mean, recap what the market's doing. It is competitive again. Is it every single listing? No, but it's more prevalent than it has been the last 2 years.
Yeah.
You need to be ready. You need to have an agent that is in this day in and day out, keeping a really strong pulse in the market. You need to have a lender that has got your back, is running numbers for you, making sure that you understand what your payment is, all of that. Credits are probably gone right now. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is. So do expect to potentially pay your closing costs. Do expect to maybe not get that nice 2-1 buy down. That's not every situation, but that's kind of the reality of the market right now.
It's just competitive enough, even on the not super competitive ones.
Now, little bunny trail off of that. Just because you can't get a 2-1 buy down, I'm not seeing this aggressive 20 to 40% over list price with competitive offers. Because rates are higher, buyers are not as willing to go gung-ho crazy for listings. So yes, a listing might get 30 offers, or like in my case, I had a Linwood buyer. There were 9 offers. It didn't get that out of hand. It increased by 6% over list price with 9 offers. So don't let the competitive offers scare you. Just have your agent run data on what are the comps doing? What were the other buyers willing to do? So just side note on that. Anyway, let's pivot back to the NAR conversation. So sellers were like, I've had 2 sellers in the last month say, well, I saw headlines that I don't have to pay buyer broker anymore. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And again, these are journalists that are basically kind of spewing their own narrative. And it's national headlines.
So let's take a step back. So in Washington, you guys as real estate agents work through the NWMLS, the Northwest Multiple Listing Service. It's a portal that listings go on, you guys work in. That is owned by you guys as real estate agents and members of that. Other locations, their MLS is owned by NAR.
Correct.
And that's where this settlement is really about. So localized to, let's just say Western Washington, because there's a few other pockets in Washington that aren't. It's not a direct effect to us.
No. And so this is one of the first things I told those 2 sellers is that real estate is hyper local. These national headlines almost always don't correlate to what's happening in the Seattle area. And specifically in our area, and what I told my one seller yesterday, I said, our Northwest MLS is not owned by NAR. It is owned by us as agents. We pay quarterly, to be a part of the multiple listing service. And we're not dictated by what NAR does or does not do. And our MLS attorneys have done such a phenomenal job getting ahead of what has been happening nationally. So, for example, I was talking to Danae earlier that in 2019, our MLS chose to publish the buyer broker compensation publicly. And agents just lost their minds about that.
And that wasn't that long ago.
And it wasn't that long ago. It was 5 years ago. And it didn't really do anything. Now, buyers certainly would just say, hey, oh, they're offering 3%, like good for you, or whatever percentages that they were offering. But our MLS, the attorneys have done such a good job of kind of looking at what's kind of happening nationally and going like, okay, how do we stay ahead of this and be progressive so that this doesn't become an issue in our state? So I'm really proud, honestly, to be a part of the Northwest MLS. Yeah. And they have done such a good job for both the consumer and the agent in our area of staying ahead of the times. We have always had strong listing agreements that spell out how the listing agent is being compensated, and it has always been negotiable. The fee has always been negotiable. A lot of these lawsuits that are happening right now is sellers believing that we're price fixing with commissions. And that is not true at all. It has always been negotiable. I'm not going to touch on the standard rate or anything like that, because there really isn't a standard.
Yeah.
The problem
you really need to talk to your whatever real estate agent you're hiring.
The problem has been transparency. That's, I think, at the root of these lawsuits, is that it has not been abundantly transparent as to how agents are compensated. And so our MLS, again, has done a great job with listing agreements and spelling out how a broker is compensated. There's not like a checkbox of like X percent, X percent, X percent. You can talk to your broker and talk and negotiate with them as to what they are going to be paid if they are successful at closing your home.
Yep.
You can choose to offer compensation to a buyer broker. Now, on the flip side of that, on the buyer side, as of January 1st this year, buyers in Washington State are required to sign a buyer brokerage service agreement. And that talks about, and I talked about it in a previous podcast, that talks about how we as on the buyer broker side, I am allowed to receive compensation from the seller. So this agreement is essentially the buyer can choose to pay me themselves at closing. They could choose to allow the seller to compensate me out of their net proceeds at closing, or a combination of the two, or maybe nothing at all. I don't know. But I have to have an agreement with the buyer side.
And that buyer's agreement also says you as an agent have the right to not show them.
So there is a section on the BBSA, Buyer Broker Services Agreement, that the buyer chooses whether or not I, as their broker, am required to show them properties that are not offering compensation to my brokerage. Now, I kind of flipped it back on my seller and I said, when you bought this property, did you pay commission to your agent? No. Exactly. So by not offering buyer broker compensation, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot and losing that probably majority of buyers that are requesting that the seller compensate their broker for them. That could be a lot of eyeballs that you are losing on your listing. It takes out
first-time home buyers that are putting minimum down.
FHA and VA buyers cannot pay their broker at all. And so you're losing that section of buyers, which is devastating for that section of home buyers. And again, these headlines are so misleading.
And I think what is most important for our area to know is our area of real estate agents and their listing service is not owned by NAR.
Correct.
They're not a part of it.
Now, it'll be interesting. We do publish the buyer broker compensation that is offered by the seller.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if what the proposed settlement is that NAR is saying we're going to take that off, which I think is the opposite of transparency. Yeah. I don't think that's a good thing, to be honest.
Yep.
But on the flip side, I was thinking about it this morning. I was like, well, I'm already negotiating with my buyer and their BBSA with me as to how I'm being compensated. So there is, the Department of Licensing can audit me and go, okay, did you have an agreement with your buyer? Did you have an agreement with your seller? So there is something in writing now in our state. Now, nationally, in different states, in different MLSs, this has not been discussed. This has not been thought ahead of. But in our area locally, our MLS has done a fantastic job of staying ahead of things. So I don't think this is going to make a huge effect in our area. I think it's really important just to not pay attention to the national headlines because real estate is so hyper local.
Yeah.
What's happening in Missouri is
going to be different.
Completely different than here in Washington State. So get your news locally. Yep. And especially from, again, I've said this 5,000 times.
Someone who's
doing this full time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like my spiel on that. And the more I kind of explained our MLS as well as potentially shooting yourself in the foot by not offering buyer broker compensation, the sellers are like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. I want to empower all these buyer brokers to bring their buyers to my property. And then it gets into this whole thing about dual agency. I don't want to practice dual agency. I don't want to represent my seller and a buyer.
That's really a
huge conflict of interest. And there's actually a section on the listing agreement now that basically the seller authorizes me to practice dual agency. And I just tell my sellers, I don't practice that. I'm not going to sign that section.
Yeah.
So if a buyer comes into my open house or they want to write an offer on my seller's property, I'm going to refer them to another agent so that they can be fully represented. Mm-hmm. Because if you practice dual agency, you have to limit the amount of services that you can provide to both parties.
Yeah. And
I think that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be a part of that.
Yep. I agree. I mean, I usually, when I have a client be like, oh, I went to this open house and the listing agent was there, I'm like, you should look for another rep.
That listing broker is representing the seller.
Yep. And that's who they should have the best interest.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think just overarching statement to kind of wrap it up is the settlement's not done. You said it was a proposed one.
Yep.
So we're still waiting to see what's going to actually happen. And we really don't know what the fallout's going to be either.
Right.
So like anyone who's talking of these like definite things, like we don't know. And there's constantly in both the mortgage side, I mean, after the crash or during the crash, I should say, whole Dodd-Frank Act, all of these different things changed. Like we as lenders didn't have to be licensed prior to that.
That's so wild.
Yeah. And then so there's been change to how we were paid. Like before we were paid on, I say we, but I wasn't in it. They were paid on yield. So like the spreads between the rate that they offered and what the rates actually were. So that's why like lenders have a bad name because they're like, well, how much are you making? We now have a standard compensation that's paid from the bank and we're W-2 paid. Mm-hmm. So there's constantly being reforms and there should be.
Yes.
Like life changes, society changes. There should constantly be revisions and adaptations and everything like that. So, we'll kind of see what the fallout or the changes are to it. And
I'm not anticipating that this is going to be this big wave locally. Yeah. I really don't. I think the one thing that I have a question on is whether or not our MLS is going to take away the publication of the compensation. But then I don't see a huge issue with that because you're already negotiating with your buyer broker anyway.
Yeah.
As a standard.
And then it'll just kind of be like who's, the buyers that can't afford to pay out of pocket, that agreement's going to have just a limited selection that they can do from purchase. And, that can hurt the buyer and then that can also hurt the seller. Mm-hmm. So
I think transparency probably has been kind of a national issue overall, just in a lot of industries. Mm-hmm. And so I think maybe the reason why we're seeing so much being talked about in the real estate industry is because there hasn't been clear transparency in however many years of agents representing buyers, sellers, that sort of thing. So I think this is a good thing. Like Ryan Serhant, we watched a reel that he put out today, and it's phenomenal reel, talks about this. I agree with him. I think this is a good thing for the industry as a whole, for us to be more honest and open about how we're compensated. Mm-hmm. I'm, while I hate that there's a lawsuit happening, I understand that there needs to be more transparency. So I'm here for it.
Yeah. Love it. Cool. Well, we are going to dive into our next series of the seller side of it.
Seller side. Yep.
From the lending side, there's not a huge amount that I'm involved with sellers unless they're buying again. But so it's going to be a very, very heavy Marisa podcasting. But I think there'll be some good information on how to kind of navigate that world.
Right. So, totally. All right. Cool. Well, cheers with our empty glasses.
I know.